Today's episode comes to you from the Blue Chew studio. Right now, when you buy 2 months of Blue Chew Gold, you get the third for free with the promo code 83weeks at bluechew.com. Hey, it's Conrad, the mortgage guy, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you? You're muted.
I do that every time, right? No, I was just hearing you, the mortgage guy, Conrad Thompson, the mortgage guy. I'm thinking, don't we have a new Fed chair slipping in the back door here shortly?
Look at you. Yeah, I think it's going to be announced or made official on May 15th. We'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. A lot of people have their fingers crossed for some positive change. I don't know what's possible right now with everything that's happening in Iran, but hey, I think we're all hoping for some better economic news in the coming months, to say the least.
I mean, I really do see a lot of these issues, not to get political. We're not going to do that here, but just observing, what we're all faced with every day. I really do hope and believe that the Iran situation is going to resolve within the next 45 days, my guess. And when that happens, there's going to be kind of a series of dominoes just falling one right after another, all of them good. So to your point, probably not right away, but my gut, the patterns I've been seeing suggest to me that right after the first of the year, there's going to be some fun to be had.
Well, we had some fun, that's for sure. Earlier this week, we were live on a Monday night, just moments before Monday Night Raw. We were reviewing the Hulk Hogan Real American documentary, a 4-part series available now on Netflix. And Eric, you lined up one heck of a special guest. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, but we heard from the one and only son of the Hulkster. Nick Balea joined us, or Nick Hogan in wrestling parlance. I thought it was a fantastic visit with Nick, and I don't know what I expected with Nick, but man, he exceeded all expectations. It was great to have him on the program.
I know I've talked ad nauseum about how much I liked the documentary because it showed, so many more people, such a larger part of an important part of his personality that people often get a chance to see. And in thinking about it, that was kind of the case with Nick Hogan in our special. Is I think the nature of, the relationship between you and I and the history and the connection and just the way we approach these types of interviews, because we're not, going for the dirt, brother. We're not in that, Bubba the Love Sponge vacuum, right? Where you have to say something controversial or hurtful in order for anybody to pay attention to you. We don't do that here. And I think Nick knew that because he does listen to the show often. Every time I see him at Real American Freestyle, he comments on something that we talked about on the show that previous Friday, because I see him on Saturday. So I know he listens to the show, and it's probably one of the reasons why he agreed to do it, because he knows the angle that we come at these things with. So I'm really grateful that he did, but I'm mostly grateful to our fans, the people that do listen, because they got an opportunity to see the kid that I grew up with, and also for Nick, because I think it's important that people see Nick in a light other than the one he was cast in as the teenage, reality TV kid. Walking in the shadow of somebody who has been as controversial as Hulk Hogan has been for the last however many years, really all of Nick's life, truly, just different degrees and different levels at different times. But, to hear Nick come out of it so level-headed, yes, articulate, he's really mature beyond his age, and that surprised me. Not so much on the interview we did with him, but in the lunch that I referred to in the interview that was only, a couple months ago. It was the first time I really had a chance to sit down and talk to Nick since Hulk died. That was something other than, being around a bunch of other people at an event, like, the funeral or the WWE Hall of Fame, or not Hall of Fame, but ceremonies and things like that. Of course, I interfaced with Nick, but I never really sat down and talked to him. And when I did, I got a glimpse of what you all saw in that interview we did with him. And I was really grateful for everybody for that, because I think he did a great job.
I think sometimes what a lot of us too forget is, we've all heard about and read about, it's almost become a trope in the last 20 or 30 years, the plight of the child actor. And I'm not exactly saying he was a child, but I mean, he kind of grew up on camera, in a reality show that we all know is not really reality. But how do you go and explain to the audience that you once said, hey, this is reality, and then later you're like, well, not really. You need to know how the sausage is made. So I don't know what I expected, but he was fantastic. And I'm glad that the world got to see the real life Nick Hogan, because in real life, and what a big weighty responsibility this is, to sort of be the forward facing face of your dad's legacy with a giant, a member of pop culture, a multimedia icon like Hulk Hogan. And now you're going to be the representative and the forward facing, voice of the family and the estate and all that. It's a weighty responsibility. And I was delighted that we got to hear from him and his perspective, but also show the world, hey, this isn't the water balloon Nick Hogan. This is the real life Nick Hogan.
And he's literally inherited not only, a tremendous opportunity from a financial perspective. We all know that. That's not something we're trying to dodge. But don't anybody think that that's coming free. Don't anybody think that that is not going to become a full-time job. It is going to be Nick Hogan's career. Because number one, the estate is pretty substantial, but it's very, very complicated. And there's a lot of moving pieces. And you really have to know what you're doing and be surrounded. You have to know enough to surround yourself with really good people who know what you don't know, who you can trust. And that alone is a big challenge, right, for someone like Nick. But Nick has, meaning because he's so young, he didn't come into this with a business background from Wharton, right? So, but he's gonna get one real quick in real life. But Nick also has an advantage in the sense that it is pretty obvious to everybody. I'm not suggesting I have any inside track on this, but I think it's pretty obvious that the WWE is investing in that Hulk Hogan brand.
Yes, clearly.
Because let's be honest, they could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
Or just kind of slow played it because, we'll get to it, whatever. Nah, not right now. There's other stuff. We got to do this one first. There's a lot, and some of those could be valid reasons, right? But for whatever reason, the decision was made, and Hulk Hogan was the star of the show. And was pretty present throughout the entire WrestleMania weekend, from what I've been told, just in terms of the different, exhibitions and all the stuff that they did for Hulk over WrestleMania. I think it's very, very cool. And I think as long as there's that kind of connective tissue between WWE and helping to manage that license and creating those opportunities, I think it's going to be an amazing journey for Nick.
It is weird, the entire documentary really told the story of how WrestleMania was largely built on the back of Hulk Hogan. And this was the first WrestleMania without him. I don't mean like he wasn't on the card. I mean, like, we can't pick up the phone and call the Hulkster and say, what'd you think of WrestleMania, brother? So I thought it was really cool that WWE leaned into that. And I hope that they continue to do that with major wrestling luminaries and celebrities. Like, God forbid. I hope Rock and Stone Cold and guys like that, John Cena, live forever. But if and when their time comes, I hope that WWE rolls out the red carpet for those really foundational members of WWE, the same way they have Hulk Hogan. I think you guys will love our chat. We do talk about the documentary, and it's always great to hear from Nick. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and be sure to check it out. It's free right here on YouTube. It's 83weeks.com. We went about an hour or so, and we took your live questions. Lots to discuss. Outside of Hulk Hogan, though, Eric, this happened last Friday, and it is the worst part of WrestleMania every WrestleMania season. Everybody gets excited about WrestleMania season until it's over, and then it's almost like you can set your watch to it. That the business is going to rear its ugly head. You always have to make those budgets, and you have to make those cuts, and they usually happen the week after WrestleMania. Last week was no exception. They did it at the 11 o'clock hour, right before SmackDown. So instead of a lot of people being fired up and having a discourse online about SmackDown, they were talking about these releases. A whole list of folks got released, Eric. I do want to run through some of the names. I'm not sure if you kept up with this, but Alistair Black and Zelina Vega, both being released. Those real life husband and wife. We know Aleister Black had some time in AEW. He's been back with WWE for about a year, and almost to the day of the 1-year anniversary of his return, he is released. Uncle Howdy, who we also know as Bo Dallas, the real life brother of the former Bray Wyatt, who left us way too soon a few years ago. He too found himself on the cut list, along with Nikki Cross, Rowan, some of us know him as Redbeard, Santos Escobar, Dexter Lumis, the Motor City Machine Guns, Apollo Crews, Kerry Sane, Joe Gacy, Zoe Stark, a whole host of other talent. And I think some of these names are still continuing to roll out from NXT. But this is the end of the road for at least this instance with WWE, but never say never. I mean, Aleister Black's been released before and come back. And Bo Dallas, I think this was his third run. So it does.
How about Eric Rowan? He's been in and out of there 3 times or 4.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Do any of these really, I mean, I know it's, I'm not going to say it's a necessary part of the business because I don't pretend to know the business, but we have kind of gotten accustomed to, hey, this always happens after WrestleMania. So it's never a shock when we see releases, but every now and again, some names shock us and we're like, man, that guy was just on TV. I think Aleister Black is probably near the top of the list there. Did any of the names really shock you? Like, I can't believe that guy's released.
No. In fact, no. And, Aleister, I don't really have a lot to comment on because some of those people I've never even heard of before. So there's probably a reason why they got cut. And some of them obviously had been on television and been involved in things that I'm unaware of. I'm not suggesting that none of them saw television, but Aleister, well, Zelina, I worked with in TNA back in 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there, maybe earlier. I don't remember. But back in TNA, she was there. Zelina Vega, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. And Aleister, I got, I crossed paths with is the best way to say it back in 2019 in WWE when he first came in. Paul Heyman was huge on him. Paul was like ready to put, blood on the table commitment to him. He really, really saw something in Alistair, and I was intrigued because Paul, Paul's got a pretty good track record, right? When he gets excited about something, whether you like it or not, you got to kind of pay attention because it's probably going to, do something, if that's something great. So I started paying attention to him, and I talked to him a few times, tried to get a feel for, where his head was at, what his vibe was like, learn a bit about, what he saw as his character, and he's a very easy guy to talk to. Talked to him maybe 2-3 times total, and impressed with him. He has, here's my take. My take is that Aleister has a very narrow perspective of who he is and what he is as a character. And I don't mean that in any kind, not in terms of stature, but I think the way Aleister sees his character in his head is so narrow. Or in another way of saying that is he's so focused. One way is kind of a bad way, one way is kind of a good way, right? But they're both kind of the same thing. And because he's been in and out, it's not like people don't see the potential, starting with Paul Heyman, and Vince hung in there with him for quite a while. And then he went over to AEW, and now he's back, in the market again. So it's not like that no one believes in him or believes he has the potential. But I think what people are finding out is he doesn't have the ability or the willingness or the comfort level, whatever you want to call it, to broaden that character. Because the one he has in mind isn't working. If it was working, he wouldn't have got cut. If it was working, he'd still be in AEW. It's not working, and it hasn't worked. So what do? Do you keep doing it? Or do you go, maybe if I tilt it 20 degrees this way? And how do I do that? Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to start doing this. I got to start doing it. Well, that's way different than what I've been doing. Well, that's kind of the point. So I don't know, man. I just think he's got all the, and I'm hoping he lands on his feet and finds that groove in a version of the character that he's clearly kind of focused on, because I do believe he's got a lot of talent and he's got something special about him that's a little hard to define, but you feel it when you get within about 4 feet of him. It's just an energy, and it's not bad. It's not good. It's there. Charisma, aura, whatever you want to call it. So he's got that. He just hasn't been able to package it in a way and execute it that works for the audience.
I'll be honest, that's something I hadn't really considered, because I know there's been some chatter. I wasn't there. I don't know. But the rumor and innuendo online is that perhaps some of his former coworkers in AEW aren't necessarily jumping up and down at the thought of him being available to return. I don't know that's the case. I haven't talked to anyone in management or anything like that. But what you just said never really crossed my mind, Eric, when you said maybe he just sees the character in such a narrow focus, and he's so focused on it that maybe he doesn't allow himself to be flexible about what the character could or could not or would not do. And so if there are some sort of hurt feelings or misunderstandings or disagreements, it probably does stem from what you just said, that he is maybe trying to be protective of the character. I mean, I don't know, but I never even considered it from that angle until you suggested it.
Yeah, and to me, I look at it's just business. It's not like if I have to change the way I present my character, is that going to affect my personal life? Hopefully, from a financial perspective, yeah, but it's not going to change who I am.
Right.
I'm not going to quit liking steak. I'm not going to quit liking whatever music I like. I'm going to hang out with the same people. Nothing really changes except for this persona that I play with and get paid for doing so. But some people don't think that way. Scotty Levy is an example in my life, in my professional life. Scotty Levy saw once that broken, whatever, the Kurt Cobain kind of manically depressive grunge culture, whatever that was, for as long as it was, man, Raven just zeroed in on that. And he was either going to make it work or die trying. And it just didn't. It worked for a small niche. It clearly connected within that small niche of audience. It clearly connected because people will still talk about it today. There's just not enough of them for it to matter. So you get the most vocal of that narrow percentage of audience that clicks with that character, right? They're going to be really passionate about it. So passionate they may not be interested in anything else. But it's not going to work commercially. And I think Alistair, in his own way, has got himself pigeonholed in a similar fashion.
Man, that's fascinating. I never really considered that, because I myself thought, man, the Raven character could have been so much more. I just don't understand. But to your point, maybe Scott Levy, the performer, could have been, but he needed to be a little more flexible with the character. Maybe he did have such a defined, because I like the Raven character, but I know you did not. I hate to put you on the hot seat here, but I'm going to ask, did you dig Aleister Black's character? Did you like the persona? Did you like the gimmick, if you will?
No. Yeah. But I didn't dislike it enough for it to make me bias against it. Meaning, because it's pretty easy to figure that you can look at that guy, which is just, it's partly it's a successful character when you take one look at it and it tells you who that character is. I mean, that's ideal, unless you don't really click with that character. Then it's like, okay, I see it right away, and I'm already not interested. That happens sometimes. It's, whatever your tastes are. So there's no right or wrong. It just happens. It's no different than music or anything else, right? You hear it, you see it, you like it or you don't. And that kind of dark, brooding, mysterious character, it's a version of the Crow character in a way, but the Crow character had a story behind it. This is just there for the sake of being there, because that's who it is. But it had that same kind of spooky aura to it, and that was Aleister's, that's what I saw and what I'm seeing now, and it's just like, where's it going to go? Now, part of that I could be biased because of my experience with the whole Ravens flock thing and all that, and the sensitivity to it. So I get that, but I'm looking at that going, dude, you've been trying the same shit now for 6 years. Hello, Alistair, I know you're smart as fuck. Come on now. tilt it, tweak it, make it different. Anyway,
Man.
I don't know why we're talking so much about this. He doesn't give a damn what I think, and will probably never listen to this. But I think it's interesting to talk about people like that, because he's got all the talent in the world, and why isn't it being exploited?
Eric, this is one of the best segments I think we've done in a long time, because I was a fan of the character. I thought the guy was talented. I didn't understand, because we had heard and we saw how much time Triple H put into the character and the presentation in NXT. So it felt like, hey, Triple H is in power now, and this is his guy. And you told us in 2019, Heyman absolutely loved him. Like, if Heyman and Paul, if the Pauls are behind you, buddy, this is going to be a home run. So when he got released, I think a lot of us were like, oh my God, what could it be? And what you just laid out is something I never considered. And even though I may think, oh no, this is a cool gimmick, I like the persona, this should work. To your point, if it hasn't caught fire yet, maybe it wasn't meant to be. I do want to ask you about some other names, but I loved your take on Aleister Black. I haven't heard that before, and that's why I tune in every week. I consider myself lucky, the first listener, and we're all lucky that we know about I Hate Steven Singer. But you know what I love? Moms. I want you to think about it now. Before morning coffee and all the chaos, hey, before the day even starts, here's mom, the one who wakes up at sunrise, packs all the lunches, handles the carpools, and somehow keeps everything together. She is the sunrise of the family, and that's why Steven Singer created something special this Mother's Day. His brand new Sunrise 24-karat gold-dipped rose. This exclusive rose captures the gold. How about all of the gold? It's a gold-dipped rose that captures the color of the morning sunrise. It's a sparkling blue that fades into a pinkish purple, and then you get that warm golden yellow, but it's stunning. It's Steven's gold-dipped roses, a real rose dipped and preserved in real gold, guaranteed to last a lifetime. Just like a mother's love, they arrive in a beautiful gift box. They're shipped for free with your own personalized message. And Steven's new Sunrise Rose is just $89 exclusively and available only at IHateStevenSinger.com. Let's celebrate the moms who make every sunrise possible. Steven Singer Jewelers, that's IHateStevenSinger.com. Eric, I have to admit, and I hate to talk about it this way, but since we're being honest about our taste today, I did not like the Wyatt 6 presentation. I thought these are very capable and talented performers. The presentation was just not for me. I don't think it had connected with the audience. It felt like a sense of sameness that we had been there, done that. But boy, the performers inside of those characters were tremendous. I think Gacy's going to be a huge star. I think Dexter Lumis is super talented. I don't think the world even knows how talented he can be. Nikki Cross, I think, connects with fans and women specifically in a way that a lot of other talent don't. I think she's going to clean up on the circuit. But Bo Dallas is the one that kind of shocked me. I'm not going to say that I thought he was going to have a job for life, but it did kind of feel that way. Bray Wyatt has become such a big part of the show, even in his passing, like the way he's been memorialized. Having Bray on the roster somehow shows some sort of connective tissue. And I know he's tried a few things. I've enjoyed them all, even the ones that we can all agree those characters were a little silly. He did his best to make some chicken salad, and I thought he did a great job. And so when I saw that they were doing like theme park attractions last year around this, Eric, I thought, hey, this is a license to print money forever. And maybe they can do that just associating it with Bray, and they don't need an on-camera representative for that. But I'd be shocked to hear that this was the end of Bo Dallas in WWE. I think he's only like 35 years old. What do you think would be next for Bo, if you had to guess?
I think the presentation as a mass, not a cool idea. It was not only same, been there, it was less than. That's always the risky thing about trying to recreate something. It very seldom is as good as the original. And I think in this case, that was the problem more than it had nothing to do with talent. It had everything to do with the presentation. That being said, I agree with you. And I think it's just a matter of, I don't know, you want to do, I don't know. I'll say out between 6 months and 12 months, he'll be back. It's just a matter of coming back with it's similar to what we were talking about with Alistair. Okay, that didn't work. Let's go figure out something that will. and he can. He will. He's a smart kid. He's been around the business his whole life. He's surrounded by people that'll be very supportive and will reach out to help him try to come up with an idea and a character that will help him, get his foot back in the door. That'd be my guess. I don't know him. Never even said hello to him, to my knowledge. So it's not any kind of inside or personal feeling. It's just he's young, he's talented. He got settled with a bad idea. All the intentions were right, but the idea wasn't. And so we're back to the drawing board. That's the way I look at it.
I do want to ask you about the Motor City Machine Guns. These guys were incredible. We've seen them on the Independents. We've seen them in TNA. They had just a phenomenal run in TNA. And there was rumor and innuendo that they had an offer from AEW. And then at the last minute, they signed with WWE. And it felt like they didn't get near the opportunities that maybe people once would have imagined. Once upon a time, people talked about these guys like they were maybe the best tag team in the world. We're talking about the real life Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, Motor City Machine Guns. What do you think is next for them at this point? Is it best to just feather their bed, make a home in TNA and wind down their careers there, and at least in front of the camera? Or do you think that they'll try something different? Mexico, Japan, AEW, something else?
Who knows? But I would think that given the opportunities that you just laid out, or the options that you just laid out, I would hope that they would land in TNA. Look, ideally, they could do a deal with AEW and make a lot of money and have some great job security, but then you're going to go into, the witness protection program. And you may or may not see the red lens of a camera for a year. And some people that should, if it's strictly business, you shouldn't mind that. If I'm a wrestler, particularly one towards the tail end of my career, which these guys definitely are, and I love them both. I worked with them in TNA, just nothing but 100% respect. And they're fun to be around. They're good people. But they've been around for a long time. They're not kids. And they've wrestled a pretty taxing style for a long time. So it is what it is, folks. There's a clock and it's ticking for these guys. And if I were them, I think having the opportunity to go out and perform and do so when I'm still, maybe not be at the top of my game, but I'm still respectable. And in fact, I'm still better than most. And I'm going to go out there and have fun and make a couple bucks while I'm doing it. Hopefully they're in a position to do that. Or hopefully they'll get a chance to go to AEW and actually, get some focus on them. That could be too. And that would be the best of both worlds. But I would think they're going to want to see some camera time.
I hope that they get a proper farewell tour and they get as much juice out of the lemon as they can. I mean, get it all. But I got to think both of these guys, they're so universally respected by fans and their peers as being really, really smart to the business. I mean, they're smart, they're cutting edge, they work hard. I mean, universal respect across the board. These two guys, I feel like, are going to, if they choose to, they could continue to make a meaningful difference in wrestling behind the scenes for decades to come. Don't you think?
Oh, 1000%. I wasn't even thinking about that, but both of them. And again, having worked with them, you look, do I know all of their potential? Absolutely not. I had exposure, we work together creatively to a degree, not to the extent that I know exactly how they think, but you get a good indication how people process things and how they articulate a vision and what that vision looks like. And because they're very good at articulating it in the context of what you're doing in terms of laying out a storyline. They're very good at that. And that is a skill set in and of itself. How many people do we know that are really good at teaching you the technical aspects of wrestling, but aren't really that good at communicating the art or the psychology of it? A lot of them. Now, they know the basics, but there are certain people that are really, really good at that part of training. The part that happens between your ears, not the physical part of it. They're okay at that, but they're really freaking good at this part of it. And I think Motor City Machine Guns, either one or both of them, fall into that same category. You know who else did? You know who else did? Terry Taylor comes to mind. Greg Gagne. He really was good at coaching. He really did understand psychology as well as anybody that I've ever worked with heard explain psychology. He's really good, but he got in his own way with a bunch of other silly stuff. Mike Graham could, when Mike Graham's darkness didn't get in the way, you know, and by that I mean sometimes he was just resentful. Like he'd see somebody young and, you know, struggling with getting over with the audience. And, you know, in Mike's mind, it was, damn, I should be in there, not him, right? You know, I know how to do this stuff in my sleep. You're never going to learn it. There was this always that resentment that Mike had with him. And part of it was the Napoleon complex. Part of it was the alcohol and the drugs. And part of it was some pretty, as we found out, unfortunately, heavy emotional baggage. All of that got in Mike's way. But when Mike, in those moments or those periods of time when they weren't hurting Mike, the darkness wasn't affecting him, he was really, really good. Really good. Dusty, same. Greg, I think, was better than Dusty, actually. Dusty was more fun, but Greg could really paint the picture. Those are guys that, you know, they may or may not have been the best to teach the mechanics of wrestling, but teaching you the shit that goes on between your ears, they were some of the best that I've worked with.
Another guy you hold in really high regard has gotten a little bit of heat in the shadow of these releases. Bully Ray has gone on record with a pretty strong quote that some people are taking issue with online.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
So here's what he says. Here's the advice. He was asked, what advice would you give these people who've been released? And Bully said, I give them no advice. They're gone. And then he later added, maybe you should have taken it more seriously. Maybe you shouldn't have put your feet up on the table. Maybe you should have shook hands. Maybe you should have been more polite. Maybe you should have busted your ass a little more. Maybe you should have cut a better promo. You've got 5 minutes. Get over or get out. Now, I think in large part, he's talking about the young folks on LFG, not necessarily the main roster talent, but either way, that didn't get in the way of him receiving a ton of negative attention. And some people are taking issue with like the idea that Kairi Sane should have busted her ass more. And I don't think that's exactly what he's saying, but some people are interpreting that way. But as a reminder, I mean, it did take the Dudleys longer than 5 minutes to get over in WWE. They came in as the bull of the woods from ECW, but it took a minute for it to click in WWE. And then they were off to the races. I don't know. I think this is rubbing people the wrong way. Is it the message that people are taking issue with? Because I've even seen people saying, hey, what did Bully Ray Dudley or Bubba Ray Dudley ever do? And I'm like, really? That's not the thing to question here. So I guess my question is do they not like the message or do they not like the messenger, Eric?
I think the people that are taking offense and making any kind of issue about this are socially divergent, mentally and emotionally stunted. That's a good way of saying it. And are just clinging together on this thing called the internet wrestling community so they can just virtue signal their asses off and get their opinions across and say things that hopefully people who are just as pathetic as they are will all chime in and like and comment on what they had to say. That's what this is. You know, and first of all, I mean, it's look, Bully, I'm guessing, I wasn't there. Shazam, I know it. I'm guessing that interview was within the context of Bully's involvement in WWE as a coach, right? So let's first look at that. So if you're asking someone a question in that environment or in that context, of course, you're going to get an answer that you would probably say to someone who is coming to you after just being released. It could be any one of 100 things. Maybe you did walk by somebody that you should have stopped and paid some respect to, and you didn't recognize them, or you're on your phone or whatever. It was not an insult. Shit happens. But maybe that was it. Maybe you just walked by that person on a bad day. Maybe that person was looking to see who is going to be the first person among all this young talent to make eye contact with me and say hello. Who will that be? Because that person's going to get a bonus. And nobody did it. I don't know. There could be a million things, and that's kind of what Bubba said. Now, if it was in the context of, after however many years in the business, Bully Ray, what would you say to somebody who fell into this category? It might be a different answer. I think it was in the context of his role at LFG.
I do too, but I think what everybody's sort of hanging their hat on is it takes longer than 5 minutes in one promo. Great examples of that are, the ringmaster, Steve Austin, and Rocky Maivia. Like, it took those guys a little while to click, and then they were cooking with gas, but they had to have the opportunity. And right now you've got an opportunity. The erectile function future is here. How about Blue Chew Gold? It's changing the way millions of men are having sex in 2026. They've got a new arousing boostal formula, combines both passion and performance into one tablet. It dissolves under your tongue. You get super fast onset. There's no more waiting for a pill to kick in. There's no more moments ruined by performance anxiety. Just the results you want when you want them. You see, most ED meds only focus on blood flow, but Blue Chew Gold goes further by combining 2 ingredients for blood flow with 2 for mental arousal and connection. So you're not just physically ready, man, you're actually in the mood. This type of innovation is why Blue Chew Gold is the #1 brand in erectile function. The process is simple and it's all online. Get started today at bluechew.com and go for the gold. Turbocharge your life and make it easy to get hard, and discover your options right now at bluechew.com. We've got a special deal for our listeners right now. When you buy 2 months of Blue Chew Gold, you get the 3rd for free with the promo code 83weeks. That's promo code 83weeks. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Eric, it's not all bad news in WWE land. There's been a lot of call-ups from the NXT roster. We saw Saul Ruka, Ethan Page, Joe Hendry, Fatal Influence, Blake Monroe, Ricky Saints. They've all been called up to the big leagues from NXT and are getting some screen time on the main roster. Have you paid attention to any of these? I'm sure that some of these guys have been on your radar before. Do you have any thoughts or hopes or dreams for these talent? Because I know you had your favorites in this group.
Yeah, I think dreams would be taking it just a little too far. But I think Ricky Saints is going to be interesting to watch. He's got a level of charisma. I mean, they all do. They're all great call-ups, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. Of the group, though, I think Ricky Saints is the guy that's probably, if I had to bet on who's going to make it to the top the fastest, that's where I'd put my money. But I do hear a lot of good things about Blake Monroe. A lot of good things. So maybe, and it's, not directly, it's indirectly, stuff I read, but from people who I have a fair amount of respect for. So excited to learn more about her. But what a great opportunity. How exciting it is to be one of these talents. Knowing,
I think
if it doesn't click, knowing you've only got 5 minutes to get yourself over. So get together. Come on now. Can I follow up at that, though? The one thing I do want to say is in defending Bully, because I think he's one of the smartest and most talented people I know. Bully also knows how to push people to find the answer themselves by not saying nice things to them. He's not like the guy that's going to make you feel good about life if you ask him what you've done wrong and why you aren't where you want to be. He's not going to make you feel good on the way to the answer, but he's more likely to give you an honest answer than most. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
I think we're all pulling for these talent that have been called up. I think Ethan Page has been ready for a long time. Really excited to see him on the main roster. We saw how talented Blake Monroe was in AEW. She had arguably the story of the year with Toni Storm. And now that we get to see her on the main roster of WWE, this is going to be a lot of fun. Joe Hendry has been on everybody's lips for a long time. I'm excited to see what they do there. Saul Ruka has been a superstar. I think she's going to take the WWE by storm. this is one of the better crops of call-ups in a while. And it is interesting to see how quickly some of the recent call-ups have just burst onto the scene. Trick Williams and Obafemi feel like they've got a ton of momentum right now. And both of those people had big-time featured matches at WrestleMania, but they're on the freaking poster for Night of Champions on June 27th in Saudi Arabia, and they just came up. Speaking of another surprise that I think has caught everybody by surprise, we got to talk about Danhausen. Danhausen is a character that a lot of people maybe didn't get, and I understand that. But he debuted. There you go, Eric, you're raising your hand. The very last day of February, I believe, was Elimination Chamber, and everybody wanted to know what's in the box. And we finally see it's Danhausen. And I don't think people understood, hey, the pyro is supposed to be less than. It's a gag, it's a bit, it's fun. But maybe people had different expectations. They thought it was some superstar wrestler making their debut or what have you. So managing expectations was the key to life in that one. But what caught a lot of people by surprise, including WWE, is over WrestleMania weekend, he was the #3 merch seller on the weekend. It took him all of 6 weeks to do that. He debuted at the end of February, and by mid-April at WrestleMania, WWE's looking around saying, we got to restock this shit. He just sold out again. What do you make of this Danhausen phenomenon, Eric?
I don't know. It's some kind of voodoo or something. I don't know. And I say that jokingly, but I didn't see it. I didn't like hate it or anything like that. It was just, for me creatively, it was like, what the hell are you going to do with that? I don't get it. I can't relate. Well, it's not for me. It is for a seriously large segment of the WWE universe, but it's not for me. And guess what? That's exciting. That's why you have people around you who can make really, really good high-risk decisions. This was a high-risk decision, but somebody believed in it. Somebody saw that upside. I don't think they just brought Danhausen in and went, okay, here's what we're going to do, and let's just see if it works. There was somebody behind this who believed in it. That merchandise was ready fast. So I'm thrilled for him. I'm thrilled for the people out there that are kind of like him, meaning he's a fan that broke in the indies. I don't know his history, but I'm guessing he was a fan and he found his way into the indie circuit and he came up with this crazy gimmick and got freaking good at it and ended up at AEW, and somebody at TKO went, we could probably make a couple $100 million off of that. Call that kid up. And boom, here we are. I think it's a fascinating journey. And I can't wait to find out more about it, and good for him.
I'm pulling for the real life Donovan. I don't know if you've seen his work before he did the Danhausen character, but he's capable of doing other stuff. But when he did this gimmick, man, it just took over the indies. I remember a few years ago, you and I did a show for Hornswoggle in Wisconsin. And I don't know if you remember, he did like a
He was there. And I talked to him there. Yes, I remember.
He had a line bigger than anybody there. Kids absolutely loved him, and they lined up to give him their human monies. And none of them got cursed, and we all lived a happier day. But I think a lot of people were surprised that Punk was the #1 merch seller over the weekend at WrestleMania. That makes sense. His first WrestleMania main event on night 2. He's in the world title match. It is the main event. Hey, that makes sense. Night 1's main event was the top merch seller for #2. That's Cody Rhodes. Well, that makes sense. I mean, he's been the top guy for years now, and he's main event night 1. Danhausen wasn't even announced as doing a match, but we knew he would have a skit, and boy, did he. But it didn't matter. Fans lined up to buy the merch, and Dave Meltzer is concerned that maybe WWE might be overexposing Danhausen, maybe burning him out. Now, I know you didn't see Friday's episode of SmackDown, but they'd had, I think, what you would call like a through line. So there were multiple segments of Danhausen. Instead of it being a segment of show, there were multiple Danhausen segments. And I know at times you've looked back at, as we reviewed some of the WCW shows through the years, and you thought, I maybe was on this show a little too much. So here's what Meltzer said. I feel that Danhausen is great in small doses, and Friday night's show was not small doses. I think if you put him on a lot of the show, it becomes a turnoff. To be honest, most people thought that would be the case, but with Danhausen, it's kind of a one-note gimmick, and it was just so much on this show. when the show was halfway over, I was like, they're going to burn this guy out. That type of gimmick is going to have a shelf life anyway. And the key is to extend it as long as possible. Now, you have certainly talked about overexposure before, whether it was Thunder or too many members of the NWO and all those sort of missteps. And when we talked to Jeff Jarrett earlier in the week, he pointed out that they had Super Eric Young and, they had Black Machismo Jay Lethal and they had Shark Boy. And they did have some over the top comedic relief. Do you think there's too much of a good thing? How do you find that delicate balancing act of this is the right amount and this is too much with a character like this?
Oh, I don't know, because I didn't see how they used them, so I'm reluctant to react to the comment in general. But I think if I step back and just think in situations that I had some control over, how would I do it differently with a character like Danhausen? First of all, Danhausen's not going to be a week in, week out storyline character. I think he's probably going to come in and out of our television lives, maybe on a quarterly basis for a few weeks at a time, and then he'll disappear. Gone, but almost forgotten. Until there's a reason storyline-wise for him to weave himself back in and make another run. Kind of like the old territory days. You work a month in, work 2 months in a territory, then get in your car and drive 600 miles and go do it somewhere else. I think they can weave that character in and out seasonally to keep the queue of the character high, the merchandise, the awareness. Keep the queue of the character super, super high so the merchandise stays up there. And then 2 or 3 times a year, like, I don't know for sure around Halloween, right? So starting in September, you can almost be guaranteed we're going to be seeing a lot of Danhausen, right? And then once that kind of comes and goes, give it a rest over the holidays and, bring them back 3 or 4 months later. That's how I think they're going to use Danhausen. So if we're seeing, what feels like a little too much of Danhausen, you might be. I'd have to watch it to see a lot depends on how it's done. Is it entertaining? Was it fun to watch? Or is this Dave Meltzer, sharing his freaking wisdom with the world for $14.99? Or maybe it's somewhere in between. I don't know. But I don't think I'd worry that much about a character like Danhausen. Now, if Danhausen was a wrestler and he wasn't a character, meaning he's going to be involved in long-term active storylines, then you don't want to overexpose him. He's not that good. He's not that over in that role. But as this character, this entertainment pop, I'd write it. I'd see how the audience reacts to it. And then when the time is right, just back off. Bring them back in 90 days.
Maybe you're familiar with the big WWE convention that they do is called Fanatics Fest. It's not just for WWE, but they bring in all the different sports. So they'll have, basketball players and football players and NBA players and all the different sports that Fanatics has contracts with. They get them together in New York. They call it Fanatics Fest, Eric. It's going down in July, and they put it on sale this past week. Danhausen was the first wrestler to sell out his meet and greets.
Isn't that awesome?
They've got something.
Well, let's not put them on TV. We don't want to do that.
But finding the balancing act is important. But think about that, guys. You make your debut and people say, and make the comparison, this is the worst thing since the Shockmaster. And 6 weeks later, you're the number 3 merch seller on WrestleMania weekend. That, my friends, is a power move.
Okay, I got to know who said it was the worst thing since Shockmaster. Is there an author attached to that comment?
I mean, didn't you say that, Eric?
No.
Okay, well, there were people online who were saying that it was the worst thing since Shockmaster, but here's what I know for sure. Making your debut and selling out all the merch is a power move. Just like how hiring Morgan & Morgan is a power move. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. They've got over 100 offices nationwide, more than 1,000 lawyers, and with over $30 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients, Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. In Florida, a client recently received $6.1 million after the insurance company's best offer was only $100,000. Yeah. About 6 million more thanks to Morgan & Morgan. While in Georgia, another client recently received $29.5 million. Up in Nashville, a different client received $10.6 million. If you're injured by the negligence of another, you deserve to be paid. If you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/83 weeks or just dial pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. That's FOR thepeople.com/83 weeks or pound law. That's pound 529 on your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. Eric, let's talk a little bit about some of the other headlines that are coming out this week. And I know that we'll probably catch up with Raj Giri about this momentarily, but there's been a lot of speculation about WrestleMania and what's going to happen and what to expect or not to expect. I was kind of surprised to hear that not only is WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia next year on, but Night of the Champions is going down in June 27th in Saudi Arabia. Nick Khan recently held a TKO town hall. It happened on Monday. And he announced that WWE is monitoring the situation in the Middle East. And he also noted that WWE would only run Night of Champions in Saudi Arabia and would not hold the surrounding Raw or SmackDown events there. We're only going if it's safe or if we're allowed there, he said. We're monitoring with our heads of security internally and with our government affairs folks externally the situation there. If U.S. citizens are allowed in at this moment in time, it is declared and deemed safe, we'll all be going there. Saudi is deeply desirous of getting WWE back there and getting events restarted, especially those that come from the United States. This report was provided to us by Post Wrestling. John Pollock and the crew over there do a great job, but I don't know what I expected, but I think this is about as good as you can handle this situation based on the wordsmithing. I know there's a lot of speculation and concern, but saying, hey, we're going to monitor it and we're going to get advice from both governments. What else is he supposed to say? This is how you're supposed to handle it, right, Eric?
I don't know what the option is.
Yeah.
To make a rash decision because you feel pressured and just tell everybody, no, it's off the table. We're not going to do it. No, you're going to wait. You're going to give yourself the time. And if you have the option and you feel safe and you've been convinced by experts that you surround yourself with that it is indeed safe, then why wouldn't you go? So I think he answered it exactly the way he had to and the way he should have answered it.
Let's talk a little bit about Triple H too. There was speculation going into WrestleMania that since he was the head of creative and since for the third year in a row, TKO corporate had interfered with the main events of WWE's WrestleMania, their biggest show of the year, 3 years in a row. There was speculation. Hey, how long is this guy going to really be here? It feels like they're undermining him. It feels like they've lost confidence. That appears not to be the case. We've got a report out that Triple H has signed a new long-term deal. And this happened after WrestleMania. And of course, there was lots of speculation about, hey, if Triple H were to leave, who would be the guy to take that spot? I mean, it's not like Shawn Michaels probably wants to do this on a day-to-day basis. He's probably got life like he likes it down in Orlando. I can't imagine that The Undertaker would be interested in doing this. I don't even know that Paul Heyman would want to. And I know that sometimes, the internet wrestling community can get really fixated on one call or one decision, and Triple H is going to get all the praise and all of the criticism when that happens. But when you take a look at the business, it's hard to find a business reason to even think that Hunter would be leaving, right?
Well, you could if you wanted to, right? Numbers can lie and liars can use numbers, and you could probably come up with, if somebody was really determined to get Paul out of that spot, I'm sure you could create a story corporately that'll get you there. I'm not surprised. I didn't know that he was up for a new agreement. Certainly not surprised that he got another one. And hopefully he got a raise, because I think, if anything, the last couple of WrestleManias where you've had interference from people who really don't understand the audience as well as they think they do.
Right.
And I don't mean that with disrespect, because obviously Ari Emanuel and the people around him have forgotten more about entertainment and connecting with the audience than yours truly will ever experience. That being said, he doesn't have as much experience with the wrestling audience, which is a very unique audience. And I've known so many people from outside of wrestling who have excelled in the movie business, in the television business, in front of the camera, behind the camera, writers, directors. I've been fortunate over the last 10 years to really work with and get to know some very talented people. But all of them, once they're exposed a little bit to wrestling, all kind of arrive to the conclusion that this is a very unique product. It's not as easy as it looks. From the outside, especially if you think you know how things work in entertainment, and you do, based on your experience in feature films and television and other forms of entertainment, you do have an instinct. Unfortunately, that instinct doesn't completely apply to the wrestling audience. There's been decades of pre-producing the crowd, conditioning the audience in terms of format, expectations, psychology. There are rules of engagement for wrestling fans when they watch a show. And if you're producing a television show and you don't understand those really nuanced but important rules of engagement to the broader audience, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. From my perspective, completely unattached, in terms of talking to anybody about this particular thing, zero connection to WWE. But as someone who kind of understands the inside a little bit, who's watching from the outside and seeing the patterns that I have a tendency to see, I see that a lot of people, it's sheer enthusiasm. You ended up with too many cooks in the kitchen when it came to making these decisions. And unfortunately, the cooks with the least experience had the most stroke. Now, do we think that that's going to keep happening? Or do we think that this group of people who are really, really smart are going, you know what? We really do need this guy. I don't know if anybody was thinking about letting him go before, but let's make sure he knows we weren't and take care of him. I think Paul's position is probably more secure now than it was 2 years ago.
I love to hear that. I do want to ask you though, and this is totally hypothetical, but I do want to ask, do you think that as we try to examine what WWE may look like without Triple H, now granted, I'm excited he's going to stick around for several years. It's a multi-year extension, but who is the successor was the question the entire time Vince was in that seat. And so now that Triple H is in the seat, I think the natural question is, hey, who's going to be up next there? Respectfully, I don't think it'll be Bruce. I think Bruce will say by the time Hunter's done, Bruce is going to be like, yeah, I've been ready. When you're done, I'm done. I don't know that, but just based on how long he's been in and around the business, I would guess that he's closer to the end of his career than he is at the beginning. Just a guess. But I don't think that it would be Shawn. I don't think that it would be Undertaker. I guess my question is, do you think it needs to be a wrestler? I'm curious, because you found yourself, even if you weren't necessarily the head writer and you never claimed to be, I'm sure you took some criticism for being you're not the wrestling guy. You didn't pay your dues. You didn't run the rope. You didn't take bumps, all that sort of thing.
I took that kind of heat when I was an announcer. Well, I see an announcer. He's never laced his boots. Fuck, I'm an announcer.
I think a lot of people, and I'm not trying to make a comparison, but I think a lot of people treat Tony Khan differently because he wasn't in the business. So that's my question is, and I'm not trying to make a comparison there. I'm wanting to know specifically about WWE. Could someone who wasn't a wrestler be in that spot? Or do you think it's necessary that it be a wrestler in that seat?
Absolutely not necessary. In some cases, it can be an advantage. And I've seen cases when it was a disadvantage. You have to be able to think outside of your skill set. You have to learn new skills. You have to be open-minded because things work differently on television than they do in the arena. We could do a whole show about this. The fact that Paul came from wrestling and learned so much about television in the course of being at the top as a performer working directly with Vince, Kevin Dunn, being a part of the team, even when he wasn't, this is my experience going back to 2019, even when Paul wasn't a part of any of the creative meetings that, either Paul Heyman had with his team or I had with my team. Levesque was never in any one of those meetings. But when we showed up at TV, Paul was sitting right next to Vince and was co-leading that meeting. At least that was the strong impression, and was involved in every conversation about that particular show in the production meeting. My point in saying all this is that Paul was very, very integrated in the television process and was able to learn the business of the wrestling business from outside of the ring. So he had that balance. But there are people in WWE right now, like if I was a decision maker in WWE and it was my responsibility, if Triple H decided, you know what, Steph and I are going to go be monks or whatever, we're going to go ride elephants in the Himalayas, take our kids with us, we're going to see the world. What do we do? And I agree with you on Bruce. I think, Bruce is at a point in his life, like I am, where you're just like, I got a couple more years. I want to wrap this up because, I want to do things, right? And it's a young man's business. It's an 18 to 20 hour a day job. It's not for somebody who's winding down their career. Ed Koskey could take this position over like with a phone call. He's that good. Now, he'd take a team of people around him. He can't do it by himself. Nobody can. And there are wrestlers like Taker, like Shawn, and others who would gladly be there as kind of a sounding board as opposed to day-to-day ops and dealing with Ari and dealing with Nick Khan and dealing with budgets and dealing with all the things that Paul Levesque has to do with outside of the creative, which is probably one small part of what he does every day. But I think a guy like Ed Koskey, who's never a wrestler, who's been there, 25, 27 years. I've seen him run production meetings. He would oftentimes run either the SmackDown side of the meeting or the Raw. I saw him mostly overseeing Raw. He ran that production meeting from time to time, and he was good. He could get it. Look at Brian Gewirtz. Could Brian Gewirtz take over that spot? Absolutely. Absolutely. Could he do it all by himself? No, of course not. But Brian Gewirtz could take that spot. Clearly not a wrestler. So, I don't think being a wrestler is a prerequisite. I think in many cases, it's actually a hindrance. And you can certainly learn how to be a great producer and writer and creator and director without having to have wrestled.
Let me go one step further. I love you like you're my uncle, but I do want to ask, when you were announced as the head of one of the shows and Paul Heyman, the head of the other show in 2019, do you think that was because of your name cachet and it looked good on a presser and it was good for the stock price? And because it's not like you were actively a part of the WWE writing team and creative team at the time, but man, that did pierce a lot of headlines. And I wonder, would a guy like a Bobby Roode or an Ed Koskey, because they're both on the team now and very valuable players, do they have the name cachet that you would look to for Wall Street of a Paul Heyman or an Eric Bischoff or something like that? Do they have the backstory? Because I do feel like a lot of times people are excited to see Triple H in that spot or host them on their show or whatever because of his wrestling celebrity, if that makes sense. Do you think that plays into anything at the stock market level?
I can't imagine that to be true, but I could kind of understand how other people might think that. Here's what I think in terms of Paul and I, and us both being really announced at about the same time. Hopefully I'm not saying anything too out of school here, and I'm going to be a little careful how I say this stuff because I do have respect for people there.
Sure.
There was a group of I don't want to call them efficiency experts, but there was an audit going on. And it was, it was one the board, wanted. It's like they were soliciting for companies like Dulett Touche, for example. It wasn't them, but it was, one of these really big companies that come in and just do an audit from top to bottom and look for efficiency and look for ways of streamlining things. Efficiency, same thing, but looking at better processes in order to achieve more in less time, right? And it's not unusual at all, especially for big publicly held companies. It's more common than it is uncommon. I've been through probably three of them while I was three of them at Turner, and I was part of the WWE audit. I'm referring to it as an audit, as a consultation, but it was top to bottom, including creative. Now, this was something that, from my understanding, which was probably secondhand at best, was that this company was coming in and reviewing the creative process. That was just one thing. They were involved in a lot of things, but creative was one of them, including how Vince ran creative. And they would sit down with us, all of us that were part of the process. I was new to it, obviously, but they still wanted my perspective, probably more so because I was new to it and maybe had a different view of it than everybody else. And through a series of meetings, at some point in the conversation, I led myself to believe, let's say it that way, that Vince was not necessarily excited about this, that this was a board decision, that it would have been optically perhaps not in Vince's best interest to resist, right? So, because a lot of it was, we had several conversations about the challenge of Vince's, swing by at 4 and it turns out being midnight, consistently. And, trying to they worked with us to try to figure out new ways to do this stuff. And I honestly believe, as a part of all of this mishigas, for all my Yiddish friends out there, all of this was really done to satisfy the board or this group and say, see, we're doing what you suggested we should do, right? I don't think there was ever any intention of Vince McMahon modifying, adjusting, relinquishing any control of anything, including midnight meetings. But he went through the motions, and I think I was brought in as, and I honestly think Vince brought me in, and I need to call Bruce because I got a little pissed off with Bruce a couple months ago, about a month and a half ago. I just texted him something and let it go at that. But I wasn't looking for a job in WWE. I never went to Bruce and said, "Hey, Bruce, I need a gig. Can you give me a?" But Bruce and I, in fact, I think we were at a convention together, and Bruce had just gotten to WWE and was so excited about it. And it was really, I remember Bruce talking a lot about how much things had changed for the better. And he was so excited. And then I think that happened one week, and I think we talked again, and he was still kind of, really excited. And I was excited for him. And he said, "Hey, just, do you mind if there's some things going on here? How do you feel about me throwing your name in the hat?" I said, "Well, I'd be grateful for that, because I would." Now, there's a subtle difference between me, "Hey, Bruce, can you get me a gig?" and him saying, "Hey, how about I throw your name in the hat?" And me going, "Hell yeah." Because I needed the gig. It's not that I didn't need it, but I think, and I tell you all that just so that you have the background of what I was feeling, at this particular time. My instincts are usually pretty good. I felt like Vince brought me in, and probably Paul, mostly because he had to satisfy this internal initiative that was going on for whatever reason. And partly because it was like, well, fuck it, let's just see. Heard a lot about him, did some stuff, turned things upside down, put my back up against the wall. I think it was all because he blew Ted Turner's money or whatever, but let's just see. I think it was just Vince giving it a shot and seeing if it really could turn things around. The mistake that I made was I wanted to come in slowly, quietly, kind of learn the system, evolve my way in the door. I think Vince wanted somebody that was either going to come in and turn shit upside down overnight or not. And I didn't. So it didn't work. There was no reason to keep me. He wasn't going to change the way he was doing business. He wasn't going to let the director of SmackDown direct SmackDown. That was never going to happen. And anybody that works with Vince knows that. What I'm saying is 100% true. So I think it was a little bit of a mirage, an exercise. But also there was part of Vince that probably, well, let's see what'll happen. Let's see what'll happen if I put these two guys together. Maybe magic will happen. Maybe it won't. Obviously it didn't.
I'm curious what this looks like, you know, a world without Triple H. It once was unfathomable to imagine WWE without Vince, but hey, they're doing pretty damn well. How will they do without Triple H? I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know, who do you think is going to be next up? Will it be Ed Koskey? He's been the right-hand man for what feels like forever. Will it be Bobby Roode? A lot of people say he's the next Michael Hayes and he's a sponge. We've heard so much praise about him. Will it be Jeremy Borash, who's being tested right now with not only the work he was doing behind the scenes with NXT, but now with AAA, it does feel like, hey, is that something that could graduate into the big seat? And you mentioned the other name that gets thrown around a lot, The Rock's right-hand man. Will it be Brian Gerwitz? We want to know from you. Let us know below who you think could be next to sit in Triple H's seat. But here's what's next for all of us. Looking good, thanks to our friends over at Quince. You know, lately we've all been a little more intentional about what we wear. We have to be, because it's a little cooler in the morning, a little warmer in the afternoons. I've started to lean into pieces that feel easy, comfortable, and still put together. It makes getting dressed just simpler. Quince has become a go-to. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are clean, and everything just works without needing to overthink it. Quince has all the wardrobe staples you need this spring. Think 100% European linen shorts and shirts from just $34. They're lightweight, they're breathable, they're comfortable, but they still look put together. And they're clean, 100% Pima cotton tees with a softness that has to be felt. Their pants also hit the same balance, relaxed and comfortable, but still polished enough to wear pretty much anywhere. Everything is priced like 50 to 80% less than what you find at similar brands. Quince works directly with ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen, so you're getting premium materials without the markup. I'm telling you, go try them for yourself. You're going to fall in love with the 100% European linen shorts. I like the 10-inch inseam. I also think you're going to dig the 100% merino wool all-season short sleeve shirt. It's a base layer tee that works with anything. So yes, it's super comfortable, but it looks kind of sharp. It looks kind of dressy, but it doesn't feel dressy. You're going to love the way you feel. You're going to love the way you look. You're going to love Quince. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head on over to quince.com/83 weeks. They'll hook you up with free shipping on your order. And you even get 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/83 weeks for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/83 weeks.
It's time for the Wrestling News Update with Raj Giri.
All right, Raj, always excited to have you here with us on the program. Let me get into frame here. It's always a little bit of an adjustment. Thanks for making time with us, man. There's so much news going around, but I think the biggest news that we heard yesterday was about CW. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah. A couple of big things, two big things on the same week. NXT, their PLEs, their deal with Peacock had expired, and they had just been doing them on YouTube. And I think if anyone has used YouTube for revenue, it's a big difference, getting revenue from YouTube as opposed to a TV deal. So they made a TV deal. So now the PLEs will be on CW. So on the CW network, people are asking if there are going to be ads or not. I'm sure there will be. I think that's how they make their money. So I would guess that there are. And then today, ESPN Unlimited, they announced a deal with CW Sports. So CW Sports will be on the ESPN Unlimited app, which has all the WWE PLEs. So now, not only will you get the WWE PLEs, but you can also get NXT and the NXT PLEs. It's basically, if you have CW, this doesn't change anything. You're still getting the NXT PLEs, starting with the Great American Bash this summer. and you're still getting NXT. But this is an add-on. So people that don't get CW for whatever reason, now they're able to access it with the ESPN Unlimited app. They would get NXT and the PLE. So it's a great add-on. It's a value add for people that already have ESPN Unlimited. So kind of a positive deal all around. And obviously with that, the other things on CW Sports like NASCAR, college football, bowling, all those things will be available as well.
Raj, when will we know the financial ramifications of this? Is this not something we'll learn until the earnings call in July, or when will we get the information about what the financial end of this deal looks like?
The NXT deals, I mean, over the years, when WWE, before they were with TKO, during their earnings calls, you never got NXT numbers really, like how much their events generated, or those pay-per-views, or the PLEs, or how much the TV deals were generating. The only time we heard about it was this last NXT deal with the CW, where it was around $30 million per year. So we might never know, because it is such small potatoes compared to the other deals that they have, that they don't really get into it.
Let's talk a little bit about the other big news, at least from a television perspective. Eric, I want your take on this too. You and I haven't talked about this today, but there's an announcement made that SmackDown, which has been 3 hours, is going to 2 hours. And once upon a time, Eric, people were very critical of Monday Night Raw expanding from 2 hours to 3. They said critically it wasn't as fun. It was more of a chore to get through. Fans weren't left wanting more. It was just felt, I don't know, a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of burnout. But the business dictated, hey, we're making so much money for that third hour, and we've already mitigated the costs. Like, the crew's already here, the ring's already set up, the production's already done. We might as well go ahead and take the money for the third hour. But now, Eric, there's been an announcement. SmackDown's going to be moving from 3 hours back down to 2. What do you think of that, Eric?
It's so ridiculous. It keeps happening. It happened to me first. I was the first one that was, the victim of the network doing exactly what you just said, Conrad, was, hey, everything's already there. We got the talent there. And, incrementally, an extra hour doesn't really cost us any more money, and we can sell 25 more ads. So do it. Because nobody understood, kind of like I was talking about before, with executives and people in entertainment that don't really quite understand the product or the audience with it. You just cannot keep 52 weeks a year, the level of interest you need to sustain for 3 hours. You cannot keep it consistently throughout the year. You're going to fatigue the audience. You're going to dilute the value of the character. You're going to dilute the impact of the storylines. All of the things that happen when you drag out that extra hour, because it's brutal to fill. You've got to keep a tremendous amount of extra talent on the roster just to fulfill the additional hour. It may not seem like it, because you can't have the same people on every single week. So you've got to, you think about it this way. How big of a roster would you need to sustain a 1 hour wrestling show 52 weeks a year? I'm guessing if you had 30 people, 45 people, you could probably figure it out. Well, that's the additional roster you need on top of what you need to not burn out your audience on the talent that they've seen for the previous 2 hours, right? Just the extra load of that third hour goes well beyond the initial mathematical formula. It's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It's adding that extra hour requires more talent, more writers, more diversity. And by the way, you don't get any more time. Now you've got extra creative that you've got to figure out. Figuring out good, consistently good creative for a 3 hour show versus a 2 hour show is a substantial workload. It's not a little thing. And in order to do it well, after a certain period of time, first couple of weeks, yeah, we'll do this. We'll get behind it. We know how to make 3 hours work. And after the fatigue starts setting in, the creative fatigue, the kind you can't do anything about, right? You're just kind of running thin on ideas because you're freaking burnt and you're using up the good ones you have on your other 2 hours. It gets to be a drain. So what happens? You start taking the easy way out. You start plugging in interviews that really aren't that necessary. You let matches that should go 8 minutes, you give them 12. And that's when it starts slowly but consistently deteriorating. And then everybody goes, this is too much. Let's go back to 2 hours. Yay, 2 hours. It's going to be like, taking a week off. This is going to be great. And everything will be great. And the ratings will start coming up. The money starts coming in. And it'll be like, you know what? We'll have a new executive by this time because they change. You go through executives like you go through underwear in the television industry. So by this time, because it takes about a year and a half, 2 years, till everybody settles in. I'm glad we went 2 hours, and then some new executive will come in and go, "Hey, can I get the ad sales team over here and bring the accountant with them, and let's figure out how we can make some more money off this show." And somebody will go, "I got it. Let's just add another hour because we're already there." And you start the cycle all over again. How many times have we seen this cycle happen? Between Nitro, Raw, and SmackDown. Over the last 10 years, I bet you this has happened half a dozen times.
What do you think, Raj, this announcement, 3 hours to 2 for SmackDown? How will this affect the company financially, creatively? What's the feedback you're hearing?
Well, just looking at how it was last year compared to this year, it's almost the exact same scenario. Last year, with the first episode in January, it went to 3 hours. And then in the summer, last year in July, the July 4th episode, it went to 2 hours. This year, it's looking like it'll be middle of May when it goes back to 2 hours. But again, it started with the first episode in January. So very similar to last year. It went a little longer with 3 hours last year. So I've got to think, that TKO has never confirmed this. They have confirmed that they do make money with extra money with that third hour, of course, but they've never said whether the deal was always for it to be 3 hours half the year and then go to 2 hours, or if it's supposed to be 2 hours, but they do the third hour at USA's request as long as they need it, and then they go back. So, it's just one of those things. I think it's a big, I think Nitro was the first show to ever do the 3 hours. And I remember in 1997, there were a couple episodes here and there before they started doing it more and more permanent at the beginning of 98. And as hot as wrestling was then, that 3 hours, that third hour just always, it just, it gets to you. And you saw it with Raw when they went to 3 hours permanently, the ratings just dropped. And instead of the rating building from hour 1 to hour 2 and peaking in hour 2 at the main event, you would see it drop throughout the show, which had never happened before. So that third hour has proven over decades to be a negative. And so luckily for SmackDown, because they've gone back and forth, it went 3 to 2 to, now back to 3, and now it's going back to 2. You didn't get the long-term erosion that you've gotten, with like how when Raw was 3 hours. So I think it's a welcome change. Anytime, usually on Fridays we're busy, and on a Saturday when I have my DVR and I see SmackDown's at 2 hours, I'm like, okay, I could watch it. But when it's at 3, I better hear it was a good show for me to go through it. So I'm all for it.
I think we're all going to appreciate SmackDown being a 2 hour show rather than a 3 hour show. We'll take a look and see how it affects the ratings. But speaking of ratings, I'm curious, do you have any insight as to how the Hulk Hogan doc has done on Netflix? I know it came out last week on the 22nd. So it was about a week ago. I don't know that that's enough time to get a real read, but do you have any insight?
Yeah. So we basically got from Wednesday to Sunday. And for that period, it did really well. It was the 4-part documentary. It did 3 million views and 12.3 million hours viewed per Netflix data. So it was, for last week, it was the number 1 show, both globally and in the US. There was like 10 other countries where it ranked in the top 10. And so, ranked number 5 globally, right behind the post-WrestleMania Raw. And in the US, number 5 as well, right behind the post-Mania Raw on that chart as well. So did very well, off to a good start. So yeah.
Does it sound like to you when you're saying that, there's this many people who watched it and this many hours, that the quick math makes it feel like almost everyone who watched it watched all 4 episodes? Is that the way you read that?
Well, yeah, when you see the number of hours viewed, when you got 12.3 million hours viewed, it does suggest that people definitely stuck around for more than one episode. And yeah, I mean, it was, it was an easy watch, I thought. I don't think it ever got too into the weeds like I think maybe a lot of fans were expecting, but it was a breezy watch. It was easy to go from episode to episode, although it may not have been as in-depth as, some other Hulk Hogan documentaries in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that criticism a lot on social media amongst the hardcore fans. They wanted more detail, but this was a product that I feel like was made for the masses. Like, my parents absolutely loved it. I don't think we needed all the nitty gritty granular detail. I do hope that what Nick Hogan said is, hey, they got a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. Maybe they can do more with that. If this does well, I suspect they may. I do want to ask you about a Triple H comment, though. He was basically saying in this documentary, it was a clip from right before they did the SmackDown tribute show to Hulkster, just a few days after his passing, where he basically said something like, without Hulk Hogan, that wrestling may have gone the way of roller derby or something like that. What'd you think of that?
Well, it's been interesting how there has been this big debate online about all of a sudden you have some people saying, oh, Hulk Hogan is like the sixth most influential wrestler ever. It's definitely not top five. And, when Triple H made that comment, it just kind of makes you think, like, obviously in the past, in other countries, there have been wrestlers that were huge, humongous stars, Ricky Dozan, Santo, Londos here. But how much Hulk Hogan being a part of wrestling in the 80s changed wrestling as we know it today? And, Triple H making that comment about roller derby, it just made you think, if Hogan wasn't there when Vince did his expansion in the 80s, who would have fit in that spot? I know they mentioned Dusty Rhodes in the Vince McMahon documentary, but without Hogan, does WrestleMania happen? Does it become a success where it becomes an annual event? Does Saturday night's main event happen? They get that NBC deal. And those wheels that started that helped WWF become the juggernaut that it became in the 80s and that rolled its way into the 90s, and they, kept those deals going. If those things didn't happen, would it be around? Would it have kept growing, gaining momentum to where it's, getting billion-dollar TV deals today? So obviously wrestling would still be around today, definitely in like Mexico, Japan, on some levels in the US, but would it be this billion-dollar juggernaut if that Hulk Vince combo didn't work? And I don't think it would. I mean, I think it would be just very different today if Hulk wasn't a part of that expansion.
I agree with you, and then some, by a multiple of 10. People can talk about these other wrestlers and the impact that they had, but the business as we know it today would absolutely not exist the way we know it today had it not been for the team of Hogan and McMahon. Vince could not have done it by himself. He would have gone the way of Vern Gagne. He would have gone last because he had probably one of the more valuable territories at the time. But he would have gone without Hogan, he would have been gone by the early 90s. No question in my mind. If Hulk would have come along at a time when there was no Vince McMahon with a vision to take this company, to take the product nationwide, to increase the value of the production quality, to present it as a spectacle, there is not one of the people that were promoting at that time, and I've worked with most of them and have met almost all of them. And I'm talking about the 80s now, early 80s, the Don Owens, the Bob Geigels, the Jerry Jarrett's, who's the guy out in California? Can't remember his name right now, doesn't matter. They were all promoters, local promoters in the local live event wrestling promotion business. None of them had the vision for television or seeing what we see today or a fraction of what we see today. In fact, they were all, including Vern Gagne, who I was on the receiving end of long discussions about why he didn't think Vince McMahon would ultimately survive. Because they thought the opposite of Vince. They thought the opposite of what we're experiencing right now. How in the hell does anybody think we would have got here if it weren't for Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon? You're freaking delusional if you do. You're not thinking clearly, or you just don't understand the impact at that particular time. And you may not understand, because I was in the business at that time, just how fragile the television industry's relationship with professional wrestling was post steroid trial and the collapse of WWE. There was a window of about 2 years in there, because I was in the business, not necessarily the wrestling business, in the entertainment business, where I read, pay attention to, listen to, meet people that had strong opinions about the wrestling industry and where it was going. And it wasn't pretty. If it wouldn't have been for Vince being able to pull the nose up and keep that successful cable television platform going to re-engage the market's confidence in the product, it wouldn't have lasted through the 80s. So I don't know. It's fun to entertain yourselves and each other with those types of conversations. It's kind of a fantasy booking thing. What if there would have been no Vince McMahon? What if there would have been no Hulk Hogan? But honestly, as objectively as I think a human being could be that was in the business during that period of time and subsequently, I don't see it happening. Wrestling would be small, little. It would be the indie scene that we see today. Only it wouldn't be as successful. It would be the indie scene would probably be a fraction of what it is today.
Well, Raj, I appreciate you jumping on and catching us up about the CW and SmackDown. Where can folks keep up with you each and every day?
Just keep following me on Twitter at @TheRajGiri, and thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I didn't mean to hog your segment. I'm sorry. I just get passionate about this stuff, Raj. I apologize.
No, I mean, I agree 100%. And Conrad, just real quick before I go, you had sent out on Twitter those screenshots of the house shows in the 80s and I think early 90s with Hulk.
Show those. I don't mean to cut you off, Raj, but let's make sure everybody see these. These were provided to us. That came online. It was on social media. I'll admit I don't know the fellow. Muji Ka Parivar, Mohammed Wazi EQ is the person who posted it, but it's a breakdown of 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, and 90. And Eric, we're going to show that now and see if you can take a look at this graphic and try to break down the difference that it made when you had Hogan on a card versus not on a card. So we all know that Hogan wins the belt in January of 84. We'll take a look at the growth the very next month. They ran 4 shows without Hogan and drew an average of 3,000. And then, they ran 2 shows with Hogan and had an average of 15,300. And you could pick almost any, of these different numbers that you want. I mean, let's just go to right after WrestleMania. We know that was March. So if you look at April of 85, 3,500 paid on shows without Hulk Hogan, 8,000 with. If you take a look the following year, let's just keep that same through line and go to April of 86, shows without Hogan. This is again, the WWF at 1 year after WrestleMania, right after WrestleMania 2, 5,800 folks there without Hulk Hogan, 13,800 with Hulk Hogan. Let's fast forward to WrestleMania 3. Right after WrestleMania 3, it's April of 87. 3,800 is your average attendance without Hogan, 9,600 with it. Keep it going through 88. Now, at this point, they've transitioned, and they're going to be crowning the Macho Man as the world champion. So you see 5,700 fans. It's way up from the previous year in April without Hogan, but with Hogan, 12,000. That same story continues as the mega powers explode, only it gets bigger. 5,800 without Hogan, 13,300 with Hogan. And we'll finally close this off with 1990. You can see April of 1990. You've got 4,000 without Hogan. That's the same month where he drops the title to the Ultimate Warrior. But when Hogan's here, 6,800. So it does look like the high water mark for the Hogan years, if you just take a look at the month of April, which we did here for the purpose of this exercise, was 1989. And it fell off a freaking cliff without him in 1990. And this is, at least in the modern era, what most people consider the golden era. And I know, Eric, you sort of alluded to this earlier, numbers lie and liars use numbers, or however that cliche goes. But this, to me, somebody put some real work in, and it's fascinating to see. What do you make of this, Eric? You're muted. While Eric unmutes, Raj, what'd you think?
Well, the one interesting thing too is when you look at without Hogan, he's still kind of responsible for a lot of those numbers. You know, like a lot of the fans in the 80s, myself included, my friends, when WWF would come in town and Hogan's not there, like in New Mexico, because it was too small of a market for Hogan to go, we're going to those shows because it's WWF and we're in WWF because of Hogan. We're bummed that Hogan's not there, but it's the next big thing. So if Hogan wasn't involved at all, you know, it's not like those without Hogan shows are doing those numbers. Those are still propped up because of Hogan. So, yeah, just, you know, his importance, I feel like a lot of people like to diminish it a little bit, and he just can't. He's just, his contributions are priceless to where everything is at right now.
What do you see in those numbers, Eric? What jumps off the page to you?
That there were a lot of wrestlers who were really looking forward to seeing if Hulk Hogan was on the card they were going to be on, and vice versa.
No doubt.
Because in those days, you were paid on the house. And if you were on a Hulk Hogan house, it didn't matter where you were going home with more money.
Well, that's what we're all hoping for. Bigger paydays. We greatly appreciate you jumping on and chopping it up. I'm glad we got to do that deep dive on the Hogan numbers. You know, that's not to say that there weren't other super influential people to the business, but in the television era, in the modern era that we're all in now, I think it's clear who was number one. That's Hulk Hogan. And you're number one to us, Raj. Thanks for making time for us every week. We appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Take care.
We also think our dogs are number one. That's why Eric and I recommend Better Wild Allergy Relief Soft Chews. This has been a game changer for my dogs. You've heard me talk about Ginger and Baby for years. My wife somehow decided that a little hellion named Little Daddy was coming into our lives, and he and I spent like 5 weeks together at the beach, and we're on much better terms now. And I got to tell you, one of the things that he looks forward to the most when he's hanging out with me is Better Wild. They taste great. It feels like a TREAT. I don't want him to hear me and run in here. These are the first and only chews with the Ancestral Advantage Wolf probiotics. Yeah, these were derived from our dog's mighty ancestor, the wolf, and it's going to help restore a healthy balance of good bacteria in the gut. Better Wild Allergy Supplement Chews include 4 key ingredients. You've got that premium blend of wolf probiotics. You've also got L-Sacchii. That's a postbiotic derived from kimchi. It's been clinically proven to reduce itchiness and redness in just 2 months with daily use. You've also got Colostrum here to boost the immune function and fight off inflammation, and a little bit of salmon oil to help support healthy skin and fur. This is great for your dogs, and you will notice a difference. I certainly did with Ginger. Ginger just turned 11 earlier this month, and that's getting up there in dog years. And we had seen her slowing down a little bit, and she spent more time chewing her paws or scratching her ears. She's been rocking Better Wild for a few months now, and man, she is like a puppy again. She's having a blast with the new puppy in the house. She's keeping up, and she just looks happier. My mom even made the comment when she came to visit me, she just looks happier. Better Wild is committed to helping your dogs with science-backed, veterinary and approved solutions you can feel great about. And right now, Better Wild is offering our listeners up to 40% off your order at betterwild.com/Bischoff. That's betterwild.com/Bischoff for up to 40% off your order. That's betterwild.com/Bischoff. Eric, let's talk a little bit about Nick Khan. You know, we talked a little bit about that town hall that happened earlier this week. It was on April 27th. So I guess that was Monday. The audio of the meeting has been making its rounds, and a former TKO employee has said that he loves when TKO does these town halls. The idea is that you get all the rank and file employees to ask the top executives without fear or favor questions about the state of the company. And they used to pass a microphone around like it was a press conference, but understandably, a lot of folks don't want to be seen to speak out of turn to their bosses. So they changed it to where now questions can be submitted anonymously. And one of those anonymous questions that WWE President Nick Khan answered was how WWE plans to address fan concerns over commercialization and creative direction. And he actually cited this as a very vocal minority. He said specifically, quote, "If you make business decisions based on online sentiment, just know what you're going to be making said decisions on a vocal minority percentage of voices." A vocal minority. It's funny because Vince McMahon has used the phrase vocal minority in WWE earnings calls for over a decade. And sometimes it's worked out. In the case of Roman Reigns, we know for sure that it worked out. But I am curious, how do you differentiate the difference between a vocal minority and the majority? Like, how do you separate the difference? Because I know that sometimes Bruce has come on his show in the past and said, well, hey, this guy would say it's blowing up all over Twitter. And then you would look and there's like 13 tweets. And Bruce would say, well, it's not really blowing up. It's 13 people. And I think that's a fair point. But it is also a fair counterpoint to say, how many other people feel the same way as those 13 tweets? Because it is a sample size. It is not totally unlike, at least in my opinion, if you were to do like a test, you see all this like a focus group. Hey, we're going to show people a preview of the movie and we're going to get feedback and maybe we'll make adjustments and that sort of thing. Where is the line here? And what is a vocal minority and what's not? How do you define it, Eric?
How would I go about defining it? Would be, first of all, I would rely on objective data, and WWE has access to a lot of data, and I would look for patterns in viewership that would suggest that that at the beginning of this period of time, when we started putting banners all over everything and logos in the ring and the over commercialization, as the question stated, I'm going to go back and I'm going to start looking at the performance of the shows from a data perspective over that same time. Did I see a drop off? Is it holding steady? Is it increasing? What's it doing? What does the data tell me? Looking at Twitter or Instagram or whatever social media as a focus group, I get it. It's an interesting observation, but a focus group is only valuable if it's balanced and representative of your broader audience. Meaning, if your focus group are a bunch of nerds who follow Dave Meltzer and are really, really loud, and they think they know a lot of shit because for years they've been paying him money to make them believe that they actually know something that they really don't know, but they feel like they do. Loud vocal minority of people that can affect your decision if you're looking at social media as a focus group, because it's not representative of the broader audience. You have to make decisions at Nick's level or at anybody. If Triple H, Ed Koski, who we talked about, you have to be thinking about how is the general audience going to react to this, not how is this, little microcosm of fucking basement dwelling nerds. How are they going to react? Do you want to put your business in the hands of those people, or are you going to look at objective data? That's how I would do it.
It's going to be interesting to see what this looks like moving forward, because I was really surprised. Apparently in this call that is out there, we're not going to play it here. We don't own the audio, but apparently, Nick actually goes out of his way to cite some tweets and social media posts where people were saying, we don't want Roman, cancel Roman Reigns, cancel the WWE network. This Roman Reigns thing is never going to get over. It's never going to work. And we know it worked out just fine. I do think that by and large, that's just passion coming from the fan base, and you have to appreciate that. Like, they're really passionate about it. But I don't think I don't see the criticism the same way I used to, Eric. And I made this analogy not too long ago with Jeff Jarrett. I feel like sometimes people view wrestling as just a TV show. And I've often made that comparison here where I would say, hey, I never cared, how much James Gandolfini got paid per episode or what the ratings were for The Sopranos. I just loved The Sopranos. And that was it. I just plopped down on the TV or on the couch on Sunday night and maybe invite friends or family over, and we would all enjoy The Sopranos and talk about it. And then we'd move on about our day. And maybe there'd be a little water cooler talk the next day, but then we were on down the road with it. But I've realized that, hey, wrestling is almost like being a sports fan. It's part of your sports fandom. So now if you were a fan of an NFL franchise, you're going to want to know, well, how much are they paying Diego Pavia? For that kind of money, we need to get production. Hey, and look, his passing percentage, and so even if you're a long-suffering, like my dad was an Alabama fan when it was not cool to be an Alabama fan, but he didn't care. He's an Alabama fan. If they're on, he's watching, and he's going to get the Alabama shirt, and he's going to pull for Alabama, and he's going to get frustrated with the coach, and he's going to cuss the players during the game. He's still going to watch every single week. I think that wrestling fandom is a lot like being a sports franchise fan, more so than being a television show fan. Am I off base?
No, I think you maybe even understating it. I agree with you 100%. I think I would probably take it a step further. And I've said this, and I don't mean it derisively, that I think wrestling fans are even more obsessive compulsive about wrestling than NASCAR fans are about NASCAR. And if I'm wrong, I'm not wrong by much. I mean, you get a hardcore NASCAR fan and you ask him a question about NASCAR, you better have a lunch and a six-pack because you're going to be a while. And wrestling fans are the same way. They're almost obsessive compulsive. And I don't mean that to sound like it's a bad thing. I'm grateful for it. You and I wouldn't be doing this show. I'd be doing something else right now. Not having nearly as much fun as I'm having talking to you and the people that are listening here and with us live on YouTube. It would not be happening, right? So keep talking, keep having fun with it, but also recognize it for what it is. And I think that's where, like I've kind of, one, just because of, my life right now is very full and I just don't have the time recreationally to entertain myself with the sloppy nonsense that you find on social media about wrestling. I wish I did because sometimes it was fun, but I don't anymore. And now when I do drop in, the level of discourse has gotten so ridiculous that I feel dumber every time I read a comment. And especially coming from certain people that are supposedly, they know what they're talking about in the internet wrestling community. It's like, man, I don't want to be in a room in case I catch whatever it is they got because it's that dumb. So I'm kind of losing my interest in it just because it's gotten so stupid. The arguments and some of the times the debates used to be kind of interesting, even if they were a little over the top. Now they've become less interesting because everybody is an expert and knows the business. And it's so stupid. The comments I see people make, Dave Meltzer amongst them, are just so ridiculous that I can't even entertain myself with it anymore. It used to make me laugh. Now it just makes me go, ooh. Don't want to catch that.
I think a lot of what you disagree with on Dave are just y'all's opinions. I think you just view wrestling differently. Is that fair to say?
No. Well, that definitely we view it differently. I understand it. He doesn't and pretends he does. That's the problem that we have. He has zero understanding of how the business actually functions. He knows a lot about what has happened in the wrestling business.
Yes.
He can tell you historically facts and information of things that have happened in the past, but he has zero clue of what it takes to be competitive in today's world and would be absolutely vapid in a discussion about where the business needs to go in the future. But he likes to pretend he does. And con people, yes, Dave Meltzer is a con artist because I use that because that's his favorite word. Anybody who doesn't agree with Dave Meltzer, or more than likely calls out his bullshit, he immediately turns them in. What are his go-tos? His go-to is bad faith. That's because it sounds like really educated. Bad faith is the most recent one. Grifter, now he's, beat that one up for a while now. But con man used to be his go-to before the internet, and Dave was trying to prove to everybody that he was cool and kind of relevant and using terms that, the younger people use. His go-to was con man. So I'm just going to go with con man because it speaks to Dave more than anything else. But his complete desire to discard facts, sometimes doing damage along the way, at least in some cases hurting people emotionally. Some of the things he said about women in the past, all while trying to convince people that he knows what he's talking about. And he absolutely does not. He's the furthest thing from it. In fact, if you're running a wrestling company, Tony Khan, I would call Dave and ask him what he thought I should do and then do the opposite. I would run the other way. And chances are the odds of you being right are going to be much, much higher.
In defense of Dave, I think we both agree he is a wrestling historian, and he certainly is going to shine a light on good matches. That's one of the first things I used to turn to the Observer and see, hey, what did he review well? And then I would go out of my way to find it. That's back in the tape trading days. Thankfully, it's a lot easier now. I'm still an observer guy. I'm still a Dave defender, but we will agree to disagree. Something you and I will agree on, though, is Brock Rechsteiner. He just got signed to the Titans. This is the son of Big Papa Pump. We know he played football right up the street from me at Jacksonville State University. And, of course, his brother Bronson is tearing it up in WWE as Braun Breaker. I know that we're all hopeful that he has a long, fruitful NFL career. But do you think there's a chance someday in the future maybe we see Steiner cousins as a tag team instead of Steiner brothers? That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be wild? That would be so cool. But that's never happened before. A second generation tag, has it?
I don't think so. I mean, I know the Usos technically count, but I mean, not like this. I don't like this. They're brothers, not cousins. I don't know. I think the cousin thing makes it different.
Damn.
Isn't that a photo? I mean, take a look at that. If you're watching with us over at 83 Weeks, you see down at Jack State, they had Brock do a photo shoot with his dad's chainmail headdress, and he threw on the sunglasses, and he had a big gold belt on. Man, you telling me that guy standing shoulder to shoulder with Braun Breaker in a leather jacket like Rick Steiner, maybe some headgear?
Oh, I can't wait. I hope it happens, man. I'd love to see that. That'd be awesome.
We're going to be talking a lot about second generation. We started the conversation today talking about Nick Hogan. Now we're talking about the Steiners. I don't know if you saw, but Sid's son says that he has made an offer to buy the Mid-South Coliseum. It's officially the most famous wrestling venue in all of Tennessee. It was the home of Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman and so many others. I mean, how many nights did they sell out there on a Monday night? It's been in a state of disrepair for a long time, and his goal is to make an offer, have it accepted, renovate it, and start running shows there again. He says if he's successful with his offer, he wants the first show to be a tribute to his dad. I would have never imagined that Sid's son would have become some sort of real estate developer, but who would have thought Vader would have been either? What do you think of this report?
I hope and I don't know Sid's son, but I hope he's got good guidance and he's surrounded by, smart people. If it's possible, it's kind of a cool idea, rehabbing an old building. I love that idea. I think I told you once, I had an idea. It's one of those million ideas that you have that you're never really going to pursue, but it's still a cool idea. I wanted to do a tabletop book about the historical venues around the United States. And the working title of the book is These Walls Can Talk. And to do kind of a pictorial history and a little bit of a background on some of the most historical, whether it be entertainment or in some cases political. The Madison Square Garden had the Nazi Party convention there back in the 30s. There was some pretty interesting things that have happened in arenas around the country. The Rolling Stones first time here, the Beatles first show, Shea State, whatever it is. Find those stories in those buildings that still exist and photograph them and tell their story. That would be a really cool approach to Mid-South, that opportunity, but it would take a lot of money. It would take a lot of planning. And I hope that if people are going to invest in this, they're smart people, because it could also be a huge money pit. Think about it. You're buying a building, an arena that has been in disrepair for a long time. That means plumbing. That means electrical. That means structural. That means bringing shit up to code that probably hasn't been up to code since 1953. That's a lot of money. And you're doing it to promote professional wrestling on an indie level. It's a great idea. Please surround yourself with smart people that are looking out for you. That's all.
Great advice. Next week, we're going to be doing something kind of fun. There was a discussion this week that Nick Khan revealed during the town hall that WWE's been using AI a little bit. Now, a lot of people just assume that meant, they're using AI to write storylines. I don't know how much of that is true and how much of that they were just using in a business sense, like a lot of businesses are now. But we are going to talk about AI next week here on the show. Of course, we're going to preview Real American Freestyle, which is coming up in just about a month. Tickets on sale now. Join them in Dallas, going down on May 30th, realamericanfreestyle.com. But I thought we would close with a little bit of Hulkster business. You'll recall, Eric, that 8 years ago, you shocked the shit out of me. We were doing a tribute episode to the late, great Dusty Rhodes on the anniversary of his passing, and you called in a friend. And boy, did he answer. Terry Bollea jumped on 83 weeks. We've got about a 7.5 minute clip here that we want to let you guys hear. Since everybody's still really celebrating Hulkster right now with this new documentary, we'll close with that. But Eric, I'm looking forward to next week. This was a great stroll down memory lane. Looking forward to talking about AI and creative next week. And we'll do it right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.
Speaking of third man, that's kind of a running theme, isn't it? It's always a third man.
Well, I mean, I guess that's probably it was our first show. And the third man is maybe what you're most famous for with the NWO. And, we sort of joke about on Tony's show that we're like the 6-man tag team champions of podcasting because we've got Lois Shivani, and we got to figure out like how to get your wife on here, or Garrett, or maybe Russo. We need a third man here to do run-ins occasionally.
Stand by.
Come on, Conrad. You know who the third man is, brother.
Holy shit. Ladies and gentlemen.
What are you guys doing cussing on the radio like this, man?
Well, you can say whatever you want. Is this an imposter? Is this Will Sasso? Is this Bruce Pritchard?
No, this isn't Will Sasso, brother. This is Hulk Hogan, brother. Who else would be sitting here on Clearwater Beach sucking down beers with Eric Bischoff, brother? Come on, dude. I mean, come on. It's not, and I do that impersonation much better than Will because I am the real thing. Okay.
Wow. Mr. Hogan, what an honor. Thank you for being on the show today, man. This is,
well, one of the reasons I wanted to be on the show was I talked with Eric during the week, and he told me you guys were going to be talking about Dusty Rhodes, American Dream, baby. And Dusty was just the man here in Florida, had a huge influence on my life. And, I was the one that said, Eric, if you ever want me to come on the podcast, or if you ever wanted me to talk about Dusty Rhodes, I'd love to do it. So he kind of like opened the door for me to be on the show with you guys. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming on, man. I'm not as prepared as I might normally be if we knew we had the greatest of all time here, but you brought it up. Growing up in Florida, Dusty Rhodes was sort of the man down there. What are your memories of seeing Dusty when maybe you were a younger fellow?
Well, I mean, it was like growing up, when I hit, junior high school and right into high school, Dusty wasn't that much older than me, but he was, and how old was Dusty when he passed away? I'm not even sure.
69.
No, he has got to be a little older than that. Well, anyway, I'm going to be 65 in August, but all I know is when I was in 9th and 10th grade, he was wrestling in Florida here. So I guess he started young, but the thing was, we watched him every single week on Florida Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley. And if he was not on the show, if he didn't do an interview, we were just pissed because when I was in high school, I had lunch, and then I had study hall, then I had shop class, then I had PE. So the last half of the day pretty much was a waste and I didn't have to do anything. So we would either wrestle at PE or wrestle in the shop class, or on Wednesday afternoons. Tuesday night was wrestling in Tampa at the Armory, and I would go down there and watch Dusty Rhodes every Tuesday. And then Wednesday, right off Kennedy Boulevard on Albany Avenue, a place called the Sportatorium, where I eventually got my leg broken my first day down there. I used to sneak down to the Sportatorium and skip school on Wednesdays to go watch him film TV there. So he hooked me from day one when I first started watching him. And if it wasn't for Dusty Rhodes, I would have never had the courage to cross the line and start approaching the wrestlers and say, hey, brother, is there any chance maybe I could work out with you guys? Because I used to follow these guys around everywhere, from the cafeterias to the arenas and everything. But Dusty Rhodes was the reason.
What was it about Dusty that had that magnetism for you?
Well, we had the promoter, Eddie Graham, and his son was a year ahead of me in high school, and so was Steve Kern. And we had a bunch of really good wrestlers here. Bob Orton Jr. We had Bob Orton's dad, the Big O. We had the great Malenko. And what was so cool about it is at that time, Vince McMahon and Vern Gagne used to share their main event wrestlers, and they'd send them down to Florida. Like Bob Backlund would come through here, Superstar Billy Graham, Crusher Perdue, Ivan Koloff. All the main event wrestlers would come through Florida, and they would all spoon feed Dusty because he was there. He was like the Hulk Hogan or the John Cena at the time, or I don't mean to put myself in the mix. I'm just trying to explain that
Sure.
he was the top baby face and all these guys would spoon feed him. So Dusty was postured as the hero, when I was a kid. Plus he could fill the bill. He could, fill that spot they gave him. It wasn't like, he was weak in any areas. He was a main event guy. He sold his ass off. He bled like a pig. He could talk. What he did in the ring as far as his work was on point. So he had us reeled in all the way. And that's what really kind of like made me love the business so much, was watching Dusty work. And his interviews were just over the top. They were just so on point, and they related to the common man, and to the guys at home, and to my dad that worked construction, and all of his kids growing up. So he was the ultimate package for all of us to watch. And that's what got me hooked, was Dusty.
I'm glad you mentioned the promos, because I think, if you're really paying attention, you can see that maybe you had a little bit of Dusty Rhodes influence. He talked about the common man, like you talked about, and you talked about your Hulkamaniacs, and just the over the top presentation. There had to be some similarities. How big of an influence was he on your interview style?
Well, he was a huge influence. I mean, the weirdest thing, when I went back to work for the WWE, I can't remember when it was, a few years ago before I got fired, they asked me to go down to the Performance Center the first day. I mean, I hadn't even been to a Raw. I hadn't seen Vince. I hadn't, been around anybody. I just talked to Triple H, and we made a decision when I left TNA to go back. And the first thing they asked me to do was go to the Performance Center. And, I wasn't even back in the door yet, but they wanted me to go to the Performance Center. So I went there, and when I talked to all the people that were breaking in, I kind of told them, it's really great that you guys are innovative and doing a bunch of new things, but don't be afraid to steal stuff from guys from the past that works, And I said, like I heard Billy Graham say one time, I pulled the bumper off a Cadillac, and it went in one ear and out the other for the fans, but it was so good. I said, hey, brother, when I see King Kong Bundy, I'm going to pull the bumper off a Cadillac Jack and beat him over the head with it. So I said it so people would never forget it. And it was just part of Billy Graham's rap, and it was just one of his many one-liners, and he had 1,000 of them. And also with Dusty Rhodes, when I saw him stick that finger up one time and shake that finger when they raised his arm, I stole that from him. So everything from the rap, a lot of the stuff in the ring, the way he sold, the finger that I always would put up on the third time, that was all Dusty Rhodes, brother. So he was a huge influence on me.